The day they moved in, everything seemed perfect. The neighborhood was quiet, with neat lawns, well-kept houses, and a sense of calm that made the homeowner feel at ease. For years they had dreamed of a place like this. It's more safe and peaceful, where life could slow down a little, and the stress of the outside world could fade behind the gates. From the beginning, they felt like this was home. There were smiling neighbors waving as cars passed by, children riding bikes in the street, and the kind of calm evenings where birds chirped and leaves rustled in the breeze. It was the kind of place that felt timeless and safe. At first, the homeowner tried to understand the rules of the community. They read through the HOA documents, thinking it was just a formality. Most of it seemed reasonable: keep the lawn neat, maintain the exterior of the house, and follow basic safety regulations. But as the first few weeks passed, small things began to feel odd. Notices arrived in the mailbox about things that weren't even problems. A neighbor's bush that leaned slightly onto another yard became a violation. Another notice warned about paint shades, even though the paint matched exactly what had been approved. At first, the homeowner tried to laugh it off, thinking maybe they were just being cautious. The first real trouble started over the gate. It wasn't just a decoration. It was a necessary measure. The property had a natural slope, a drainage problem, and a path that connected to the back part of the lot. Without the gate, anything could get in. People, stray animals, even the occasional lost dog from another street. It made sense to have it locked for safety. The homeowner believed it was completely legal and within their rights, but the HOA didn't see it that way. Their first letter was polite enough, asking if the gate could be removed or modified. The homeowner responded with a copy of property documents and local codes, explaining that the gate was legal, necessary, and safe. They thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Soon, notices became more frequent, tone harsher. The polite letters were replaced by warnings, threats of fines, and mentions of further action if the gate wasn't addressed immediately. At first, the homeowner felt frustration rising. They tried to reason, to ask questions, to get clear answers. Every time they called or emailed, the responses were vague or contradictory. One letter would say one thing. The next would say the opposite. Rules seemed to change overnight. The homeowner realized that the HOA wasn't concerned with facts or fairness. They were concerned with control. Neighbors started whispering. In passing conversations, they mentioned their own experiences, how a small fence caused endless arguments, how parking a car slightly off-center brought months of letters. Some advised caution, warning that the HOA could be relentless. Others offered silent solidarity, nodding in understanding but avoiding attention. The homeowner noticed the difference. Many neighbors were afraid to speak openly. Fear had built quietly over the years, a sense that the HOA could disrupt your life over the smallest perceived misstep. And now, the homeowner understood why. The gate wasn't just a piece of wood and metal. It had become a symbol. The HOA wanted to assert authority, and the homeowner had become the test. At first, there was anger. The homeowner stayed up late reading the HOA's rules, scanning local ordinances, and comparing everything to their situation. Every rule they found contradicted the letters they received. Nothing in law required the gate to be removed. Every safety regulation they followed, every neighbor approval they collected, seemed ignored by the HOA. The frustration grew heavier with each notice. The homeowner felt trapped between wanting to comply and wanting to stand up for what was legal and safe. There was a part of them that wanted to scream, to confront the board in person and demand an explanation. But experience and instinct told them that confrontation could escalate the problem. They needed patience, clarity, and proof. The battle wasn't with emotion, it was with reality. And reality was on their side. As days passed, the homeowner began documenting everything. Each letter, each email, each phone call was carefully saved. Dates, times, names, and conversations were logged in a notebook. Photos were taken of the gate, the slope, the drainage, and the surrounding property. Even the small details mattered. The way the latch worked, the fence posts, the locks. This documentation wasn't just for legal reasons. It was for peace of mind. Every time frustration built, they could look at the notebook and remind themselves that they were prepared, that there was a plan. Slowly, the anger started to turn into determination. If the HOA wanted a fight, the homeowner was ready, but they would fight smart, not recklessly. The community watched quietly. Some neighbors had noticed the homeowner walking slowly around the property, taking photos, reading letters, and making notes. Some admired the effort, sensing that the homeowner wasn't just reacting, they were thinking ahead, building a foundation. Others remained cautious, unwilling to attract attention from the board. Rumors began to swirl in the quiet neighborhood, as whispers often do. Some people said the HOA had never faced resistance like this. Some said it was only a matter of time before things escalated. The homeowner didn't mind the whispers. What mattered was what was real, not what people said behind closed doors. Then came the first hint of intimidation. One afternoon, a board member appeared at the property without warning, inspecting the gate and taking pictures. The homeowner wasn't home at the time. The neighbors noticed uneasy. Later, the homeowner received another letter claiming violations that didn't exist. And this time, there were threats of fines. The tone was sharper, the language pointed. It was no longer about rules. It was about asserting control. The homeowner felt the weight of the situation. They realized that simply explaining themselves or showing proof would not be enough. This was bigger than one gate, one house. It was about principle, about standing firm in the face of arbitrary authority at this point. The homeowner made a quiet decision. They would not remove the gate. They would not give in to threats. They would act within the law, patiently, and let the proper systems handle it. It was not defiance for its own sake. It was a strategic choice. Each time they read a new letter, they responded calmly and factually. No emotion, no aggression, just evidence and clarity. They knew that emotional reactions would only fuel the HOA's desire to escalate. Patience and preparation were their strongest tools. Life went on, even with the tension in the air. The homeowner continued with daily routines, caring for the yard, walking the dog, and maintaining a sense of normalcy. Yet, the presence of the letters and the occasional HOA visit was a constant reminder of the battle simmering beneath the surface. Friends and family expressed concern, warning that things could get worse. The homeowner appreciated the worry, but didn't let it interfere with their judgment. Fear could be contagious, but it could also cloud decision-making. Calmness, observation, and careful action were the antidotes. There were small victories along the way. Sometimes a neighbor would quietly check in, asking how things were going or sharing similar stories. Occasionally, the HOA would make a mistake in a notice, and the homeowner could point it out with proof. Each time, it reinforced the importance of preparation and documentation. The homeowner began to see the bigger picture. This was not just about a gate. It was about fairness, responsibility, the courage to stand up to arbitrary authority when it threatened safety and legality. The struggle was as much internal as external, a test of patience and resolve. The tension grew as weeks passed. The homeowner noticed the difference in behavior among the board members. Some seemed frustrated that the gate was still in place. Others avoided direct contact. It was subtle, but noticeable. The homeowner kept detailed notes on these interactions, noting patterns and inconsistencies. They began to understand that the HOA's power was more fragile than it appeared. Authority can intimidate, but it can also crumble under scrutiny. The key was not to fight blindly, but to let evidence and calm reasoning do the work. By the end of the first few months, the homeowner had a clear sense of what lay ahead. They were no longer reacting emotionally. They were planning strategically. Each letter, each visit, each threat was logged, analyzed, and countered with clarity. The gate remained in place, legal and safe, a symbol not of rebellion, but of preparation and principle. The tension in the neighborhood remained, but the homeowner had found a quiet strength. Life in the community continued, but with a new awareness of the subtle power dynamics at play. They were ready for what came next, confident that patience, careful documentation, and a firm understanding of their rights would guide them through the storm that was only beginning. The weeks following the first confrontation with the HOA were tense. The homeowner felt the weight of the notices, letters, and the occasional visit from board members. Every time a letter arrived, it was like a small jolt of anxiety. It didn't matter that the homeowner knew they were right. The tone of the HOA had changed from polite reminders to something sharper, something designed to pressure and intimidate. At first, the homeowner felt anger, a sharp, burning kind that made them want to respond immediately, to write back with all the frustrations they had bottled up, but they didn't. They had learned patience already. Every response would be calm, factual, and backed by evidence. Emotional reactions would only make the situation worse. The board didn't let up. Each week seemed to bring a new threat, a new rule that had supposedly been violated. Sometimes it was subtle as suggestion that the gate needed a different lock, or that the height of the posts wasn't quite right. Other times it was more direct, with threats of fines or even legal action. Neighbors began to notice the tension. Some nodded in sympathy when passing by, others stayed silent, clearly afraid to get involved. It was strange, the way a few pieces of wood and metal on a property could suddenly stir so much fear in a whole community. The homeowner realized that this wasn't just about the gate. It was about the board asserting its authority, about proving control. That thought didn't make it easier, but it made the situation clearer. The homeowner started to notice patterns in the HOA's behavior. They would send letters late in the afternoon, often on Fridays, when the board knew people would have a weekend to stew over the threat. Some letters were vague, leaving room for misinterpretation. One letter might claim the gate violated one rule, the next might say something completely different. It became obvious that they were trying to confuse and pressure. The homeowner made a decision to document everything meticulously. Every letter, every email, every phone call was logged with dates, times, and summaries of what was said. They even started taking photos of the gate, the locks, the surrounding property, and anything else that could prove they were in compliance. The act of documenting brought some peace. It reminded the homeowner that they were prepared, that they weren't helpless, that they had facts on their side. Phone calls with the HOA were even more frustrating. Whenever the homeowner asked for clarification, the answers were vague. Sometimes a board member would say one thing, and later a different board member would say the opposite. It became clear that the HOA was relying on intimidation rather than clear communication. The homeowner learned to keep conversations short, polite, and focused only on facts. They stopped debating or arguing, knowing that any emotional response would likely be used against them. Slowly, they began to see a strategy forming. They wouldn't fight with anger. They would fight with patience, evidence, and quiet persistence. Even though the homeowner stayed calm, the stress of the situation began to creep into everyday life. Simple tasks around the house felt heavier. Walking the dog or tending the garden was accompanied by the thought of what letter might arrive next, what new claim the HOA might make. Friends and family expressed concern, warning about how exhausting it must be, and suggesting that perhaps giving in would be easier. The homeowner listened, but didn't let fear dictate actions. They knew that giving in would solve nothing. It would only embolden the HOA to make more unreasonable demands in the future. The gate was more than wood, and metal it was a symbol of standing up for what was right and legal. As the weeks turned into months, the homeowner began to notice subtle changes in the neighborhood. Some neighbors started speaking more openly, quietly mentioning their own past struggles with the HOA. Others continued to avoid involvement, but even their silence seemed to speak volumes. The homeowner realized that many people in the community had quietly lived with this pressure for years. They had learned to comply silently, to avoid any confrontation, no matter how unreasonable. The homeowner felt a mix of empathy and determination. They weren't just fighting for the gate, they were fighting for a small piece of fairness in a system that often ignored it. Each small interaction, each quiet acknowledgement from a neighbor, reinforced the importance of standing firm. The tension escalated when one day, a board member appeared unannounced at the property. They didn't knock, they just walked up, camera in hand, taking pictures of the gate and the surrounding area. The homeowner wasn't home at the time, but neighbors noticed the visit and expressed concern. Later, a letter arrived in the mailbox, more pointed and threatening than any before. This wasn't about rules anymore. It was about intimidation. The homeowner read the letter calmly, then set it aside to be logged in the notebook. They didn't reply immediately. They didn't react emotionally. Instead, they focused on the facts. The gate was legal, safe, and necessary. Any response would be grounded in that truth. The homeowner also began to notice the board's internal dynamics. It seemed that some members were frustrated that their threats had no effect. While others avoided confrontation, unsure how to proceed, the homeowner didn't let this distract them, but it gave them insight. They realized that authority often looks stronger than it is. When faced with calm, prepared resistance, even the most intimidating organizations can falter. The key was not to attack, but to stand firm and let the system reveal the truth. In addition to legal documentation, the homeowner also turned attention to practical safety measures. The gate wasn't just a point of contention, it served a purpose. They ensured the locks worked properly, the fence posts were secure, and drainage was maintained to prevent erosion or flooding. They even added small signs to make the gate's purpose clear, without being confrontational. These steps weren't about compliance with the HO. They were about demonstrating responsibility. If anyone tried to argue that the gate was unsafe or improper, the homeowner would have proof that it was not only legal, but also thoughtfully maintained. The homeowner began spending quiet evenings reflecting on the situation. They realized that patience was more powerful than confrontation. Every time they felt frustration rising, they reminded themselves that the board's threats were only words unless backed by law. They were not powerless, and their careful preparation was stronger than intimidation. They also began to notice that their confidence affected neighbors. Some started asking questions, quietly admiring the homeowner's calm and thorough approach. Others shared stories of their own experiences with the board. Slowly, a sense of community and support began to form. Even in a place where fear had been common for years, despite the tension, the homeowner tried to keep life normal. They tended the garden, took walks, and maintained friendships. Yet, the presence of the HOA's letters and occasional visits was a constant reminder of the battle simmering beneath the surface. Simple tasks became small victories. The mailbox received routine bills instead of threats. A neighbor smiled instead of avoiding eye contact. The gate held firm against wind, rain, and scrutiny. Each day, the homeowner built a quiet resilience, understanding that strength wasn't loud or confrontational. It was steady, prepared, and unwavering. One afternoon, another letter arrived. The tone was sharper than before, implying fines and even legal action if the gate wasn't removed immediately. The homeowner read it carefully, logged it, and then sat quietly thinking. They didn't panic. They didn't argue. Instead, they reached out to a local official to confirm property rights, zoning regulations, and safety codes. Every step was deliberate. Every action was documented. The homeowner understood that calm and preparation were far more effective than shouting or rushing. They were building a foundation, and once it was complete, the HOA's threats would have little power. By the end of this period, the homeowner had transformed the way they approached conflict. Fear and anger had been replaced by strategy, preparation, and quiet resolve. The gate remained locked, legal and safe, untouched by threats. The letters continued to arrive, but they no longer carried the same weight. The homeowner had learned the power of patience, the importance of documentation, and the strength of acting within the law. Neighbors noticed the change, some quietly supportive, others curious. And the homeowner realized that even in a tense situation, calm determination could shift the balance of power through it all. The homeowner never lost sight of why the gate existed in the first place. It wasn't about defiance. It was about safety, responsibility, and peace of mind. Each day, each letter, each visit from the board became part of a larger lesson. Authority can intimidate, but preparation, patience, and truth are far stronger than threats. The homeowner understood that the battle was far from over, but for now, they had gained a quiet confidence. They were no longer reacting to fear. They were acting from a place of strength, ready for whatever came next. Knowing that the real power wasn't in shouting or defiance, it was in careful planning, calm resolve, and letting the right systems handle the situation. The homeowner had reached a point where letters and threats no longer caused panic. They understood that the HOA thrived on fear and confusion, but neither would work anymore. They had spent weeks documenting everything, from every notice to every photo of the gate, the locks, and even the surrounding property. They had read countless local codes, zoning laws, and safety regulations. They had spoken quietly to neighbors who had experienced similar harassment in the past. Now it was time to take the next step, not with emotion or confrontation, but with systems that had real authority. It began quietly with a phone call to the local zoning office. The homeowner explained the situation calmly, stating the facts without exaggeration or complaint. They described the gate, its purpose, the slope of the property, and the letters they had received from the HOA. The official listened carefully, asked a few questions, and requested copies of property documents, letters, and photos. The homeowner provided everything promptly, making sure that every detail was clear and easy to understand. It was a simple action, but it marked a turning point. Instead of reacting to the HOA, they were letting the proper authorities review the situation. The next day, the homeowner followed up with the county building department. They explained that the gate was essential for safety, given the drainage and natural slope of the property. They described potential risks if the gate were removed and provided the official documentation again. The building department promised to send someone for an inspection, noting that it would be impartial and based on safety and compliance, not complaints from neighbors or boards. The homeowner felt a quiet relief. They were no longer alone in the battle. Systems designed to ensure fairness and safety were now involved, and the HOA could no longer operate unchecked while waiting for official responses. The homeowner also began observing nature around the property. It might sound strange, but it became a form of quiet strategy. The slope of the land made runoff a concern. The gate helped prevent small animals from wandering onto dangerous terrain. Drainage patterns were better managed when the gate remained in place. Even birds and wildlife seemed to rely on the partially fenced areas for nesting. The homeowner documented these patterns with photos and notes, understanding that real evidence from nature itself could support their case. It was not just compliance with it was responsibility, thoughtfulness, and care. Neighbors began noticing the homeowner's calm approach. Some approached quietly, asking about the letters and notices. Others nodded from across the street, a quiet acknowledgement of support. The homeowner realized that standing firm without anger was influencing the community. People had been living in quiet fear of the HOA for years. Now, they could see that resistance was possible without being confrontational. Each small conversation with neighbors strengthened the homeowner's sense of purpose. They weren't just protecting a gate, they were showing that fairness and reason could prevail, even when authority tried to intimidate. The inspection finally came. An official from the county visited the property, carefully examining the gate, slope, the drainage, and the surrounding areas. They took notes, asked questions, and observed quietly. The homeowner answered calmly and factually, explaining why the gate was necessary and pointing out safety measures that had been implemented. The official seemed thorough but impartial, showing no interest in the HOA's opinions, only in facts and compliance. After a detailed review, they promised a written report confirming whether the gate was within regulations. It was a small victory, but a meaningful one. The homeowner felt a sense of validation, not from victory over the HOA, but from knowing that proper systems were observing, recording, and evaluating the situation fairly. Meanwhile, the HOA continued sending letters, unaware that authorities were reviewing everything. One particularly harsh letter threatened legal action if the gate wasn't removed within a week. The homeowner read it, logged it, and calmly prepared another copy for the county office. They did not reply directly to the HOA, understanding that every word they wrote could be used to provoke or confuse. The board continued acting as if their threats had power, but in reality, the homeowner had shifted the leverage. The power of evidence and legal oversight now outweighed any arbitrary threats. During this period, the homeowner noticed other subtle ways the HOA's control was weakening. Board members avoided direct encounters, seemed hesitant when neighbors asked questions, and even contradicted each other in letters. The homeowner didn't let this distract them but recorded every interaction. These small cracks in authority were not the goal, but they provided insight into the board's behavior. The homeowner realized that patience, careful observation, and proper documentation were creating momentum. The system itself would eventually speak, and when it did, the HOA would have no choice but to respond to facts, not fear. At the same time, the homeowner began preparing for potential legal discussions. They contacted a local attorney, familiar with property rights and HOA regulations. It's not because they wanted to sue, but to understand the full range of options and protections. The attorney reviewed the documentation, the letters, and the inspection requests. They confirmed that the gate was legal, safe, and fully compliant with codes. They also explained that if the HOA tried to enforce fines or remove the gate, there were clear steps to protect the homeowner. This knowledge provided another layer of calm. Fear of legal repercussions had been a powerful tool for the HOA, and now the homeowner understood that their position was solid. Life continued around the property in its usual rhythms. The homeowner tended the garden, watched the wildlife, and walked around the property with a quiet sense of purpose. Birds nested near the fence posts, squirrels ran along the slope, and the gate continued to serve its intended function. The homeowner took photos of these small, everyday moments, noting how the environment interacted with the property. It may have seemed minor, but each detail could be used as evidence of responsible ownership and the necessity of the gate. It was a demonstration that the homeowner's actions were thoughtful, lawful, and careful. One afternoon, a neighbor approached cautiously. They had witnessed a board member taking photos of the gate earlier in the week and were curious. The homeowner explained the situation calmly, without venting or exaggerating. They showed the documentation, the letters, and the inspection notes. The neighbor listened quietly, nodding in understanding. Later, they mentioned how impressed they were by the homeowner's calm approach. They admitted that most people in the neighborhood avoided conflict entirely, fearing retaliation. The homeowner smiled quietly, knowing that their actions were already influencing others. Standing firm without anger was a lesson in itself. As weeks passed, the inspection report arrived from the county. It confirmed what the homeowner had expected. The gate was fully compliant, safe, and necessary. There were notes about drainage, slope, and even wildlife, which all reinforced the homeowner's position. The official report was thorough and impartial, leaving no room for misinterpretation. The homeowner read it carefully, logged it, and quietly celebrated. There was no need for fanfare. The true victory lay in facts and documentation, not in confrontation. This report was more than just a piece of paper. It was the first official acknowledgement that the HOA's threats were unfounded. With this report in hand, the homeowner didn't rush to confront the HOA. They continued life as usual, letting the official documentation speak for itself. Letters from the board still arrived, but now the homeowner simply logged them, prepared copies for the authorities if needed, and continued daily routines. Each visit from the board, each new notice, carried less weight. The homeowner had shifted the balance of power. The gate remained locked, functional, and fully compliant, a symbol of calm, strength, and preparation. During this time, the homeowner also began thinking about long-term strategy. They realized that the HOA's power relied heavily on fear and confusion. Once those were removed, the board had little leverage. The homeowner's approach, calm, factual, and methodical, was slowly creating a ripple effect. Neighbors were noticing, authorities were involved, and documentation was complete. The homeowner understood that this wasn't about defeating the HOA in a dramatic confrontation. It was about creating an environment where truth, preparation, and responsibility outweighed intimidation. The lesson was subtle, but powerful. Systems, facts, and patience were far stronger than threats or bluster. Even as the situation became more secure, the homeowner remained vigilant. They continued to log letters, track interactions, and take photos of the property. They maintained the gate, ensuring it was functional, safe, and thoughtful in every detail. Each action reinforced the homeowner's position. The HOA could threaten endlessly, but the evidence and official oversight made the threats meaningless. Life in the neighborhood continued. but there was a new sense of calm around the property. The homeowner knew that the next steps would be crucial. The gate had held through pressure, intimidation, and threats. Now, the homeowner was letting proper authorities, evidence, and careful observation handle the situation. By the end of this period, the homeowner had transformed the conflict into a test of patience and preparation. Fear and frustration had been replaced by careful planning and quiet confidence. The HOA could continue sending letters, but the homeowner knew that the facts were on their side. The gate was legal, safe, and necessary. Systems of authority and oversight were involved, and neighbors had begun noticing the homeowner's calm approach. The situation had shifted from a personal battle to a demonstration of how preparation, documentation, and thoughtful action could overcome intimidation. The homeowner understood that the fight was far from over, but they were ready. They had learned that patience, evidence, and careful observation were far more powerful than anger or retaliation. The gate remained a symbol not of rebellion, but of preparation, responsibility, and quiet strength. Life continued in the neighborhood. Birds nested near the fence, the slope remained secure, and the homeowner continued daily routines with a sense of purpose. They were no longer reacting to fear or intimidation. They were letting the system speak, letting nature reinforce their decisions, and waiting calmly for the results of careful preparation to unfold. The weeks that followed the county inspection brought a subtle but noticeable shift in the neighborhood. The homeowner continued with daily routines, tending the garden, walking around the property, and keeping the gate maintained. Letters from the HOA still arrived, but they no longer carried the same weight. The county inspection had confirmed what the homeowner already knew: the gate was legal, safe, and necessary. The report had been thorough, detailing the slope, drainage, and even small observations about wildlife. It was a clear validation that the HOA's claims had no legal or practical basis. Even so, the homeowner knew the battle was not over. The HOA could continue to send letters, make threats, or try to intimidate in other ways. The homeowner remained vigilant, logging every notice and documenting each interaction. But now, there was a sense of quiet confidence. The shift in power was subtle but real. Where before the homeowner had felt pressure and anxiety, now they felt control. Not through force or aggression, but through preparation, facts, and patience. The letters from the HOA became almost routine, read carefully, logged, then set aside. Neighbors began to notice the change as well. Some approached quietly, asking questions about how the homeowner had handled the situation. Others mentioned their own experiences with the HOA, sharing stories of fines, threats, and confusion. The homeowner listened patiently, offering advice without judgment, simply sharing what they had learned about documentation, calm responses, and reliance on official inspections. Slowly, the homeowner realized that their quiet resilience was inspiring others. The fear that had kept the community silent for years was beginning to shift. People were starting to see that the HOA's power relied on intimidation and uncertainty, and when those were removed, even the most aggressive boards could be checked. The HOA, for its part, began to show cracks in confidence. Letters became less detailed, and some were even contradictory. One notice demanded the removal of the gate, while another seemed to suggest that no action was necessary. Board members avoided direct encounters, leaving messages with vague threats but no real follow-through. It was as if the momentum had shifted, but the HOA didn't yet understand why. They were accustomed to residents complying without question, but now they faced someone who was calm, informed, and prepared. The balance of power was changing. One day, the homeowner received a call from a neighbor who had attended an HOA meeting. The board had been discussing the situation, and it was clear that some members were frustrated. They had expected the homeowner to comply immediately, to remove the gate quietly and without resistance. Instead, they had faced patience, documentation, and official validation from the county. Some board members argued internally about how to proceed, while others seemed hesitant to push further without risking legal repercussions. The homeowner didn't attend the meeting, but listened quietly to the account. The internal discord of the board was a reminder that preparation and calm strategy were far more effective than confrontation. With this new understanding, The homeowner began to prepare for further validation. They had already involved the county, documented everything, and maintained the property responsibly. Now, they reached out to a local environmental agency, explaining how the gate contributed to responsible drainage and wildlife protection. Officials visited the property, observed the slope, drainage patterns, and natural habitats, and confirmed that the gate had a positive effect on safety and the environment. It was an unexpected advantage in nature itself, documented and verified, supported the homeowner's position. Each visit, each observation reinforced the strength of patience and careful planning. Life in the neighborhood slowly adjusted to the homeowner's quiet strength. Children played safely near the property, aware that the gate served a purpose. Neighbors who had once been hesitant began to speak openly, sharing concerns about how the HOA had managed other properties. Some quietly thanked the homeowner for showing that it was possible to stand firm without escalating conflict. The homeowner smiled quietly, understanding that this wasn't just about the gate anymore. It was about demonstrating responsibility, integrity, and calm strength in the face of arbitrary authority. The HOA, sensing that its tactics were losing effectiveness, began sending letters that were less frequent but sharper in tone. One notice implied potential legal action if the gate was not removed immediately. The homeowner read it carefully, logged it, and prepared a response for the authorities if necessary. But they did not respond emotionally, nor did they engage in argument. Every action was deliberate, measured, and backed by evidence. The letters, which once caused anxiety and frustration, were now part of a routine that the homeowner handled with calm efficiency. Neighbors continued to observe. Some had quietly dealt with fines or threats from the HOA in the past, and now they saw that resistance was possible without confrontation. They asked questions, shared their own experiences, and slowly began to understand that the homeowner's calm and prepared approach was more effective than fear or aggression. Even small gestures of support mattered: nods in passing, quiet acknowledgments, and shared observations of the HOA's inconsistencies. Each small interaction strengthened the homeowner's resolve and reinforced the quiet shift in the neighborhood's balance of power. The turning point came during another unexpected visit from the board. A few members appeared at the property, cameras in hand, clearly hoping to intimidate. The homeowner was prepared. They calmly documented the visit, noting the date, time, and the board members' actions. They did not argue or confront. Instead, they allowed the visit to be recorded as evidence, demonstrating compliance, responsibility, and readiness. The board members left without further action, clearly frustrated by the homeowner's calm demeanor and thorough preparation. The power of intimidation, which had once felt overwhelming, had little effect against documented facts and patient persistence. After this visit, the homeowner noticed a subtle change in the letters from the HOA. They became less threatening and more procedural. As if the board had realized that aggressive tactics were ineffective, even their tone shifted slightly, suggesting a recognition that the homeowner's position was strong. It was not a victory declared loudly, but a quiet acknowledgement that preparation and evidence carried more weight than threats. The homeowner felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing that the strategy of patience, documentation, and responsible action was working. During this time, the homeowner also continued to focus on practical improvements. The gate remained secure, locks maintained, and drainage systems reinforced. Small signs explained the purpose of the gate without appearing confrontational. Birds, squirrels, and other small wildlife continued to interact safely with the property, further illustrating the positive impact of careful planning. Each detail, each careful action, strengthened the homeowner's case and demonstrated a commitment to responsibility. It was a reminder that preparation and integrity often speak louder than words or threats. Neighbors continued to engage quietly, asking questions and seeking advice. The homeowner shared experiences and strategies without venting frustration or seeking confrontation. It became clear that the homeowner's approach was teaching others a lesson in calm, strategic resistance. People began to see that fear and intimidation lose power when met with preparation, patience, and evidence. The homeowner understood that the true victory was not just about the gate, It was about showing that fairness, responsibility, and calm strength could prevail even against arbitrary authority. The HOA's attempts to regain control became less effective with each passing week. Letters arrived sporadically, sometimes contradictory, and visits were less frequent. Board members seemed uncertain, hesitant to push too hard without risking exposure or legal repercussions. The homeowner remained calm, continuing to log every interaction, document every letter, and maintain the property responsibly. The shift in power was not dramatic or public, but it was unmistakable. Authority that relied on fear had been checked by preparation, patience, and facts. By the end of this period, the homeowner had achieved a quiet victory. The gate remained secure, legal, and necessary. The HOA's tactics had lost effectiveness, and the neighborhood had begun to notice the power of calm, prepared action. Neighbors approached with questions, shared stories, and quietly acknowledged the homeowner's persistence. The homeowner understood that the real strength lay not in confrontation but in preparation, responsibility, and patience. Each letter, visit, and inspection had been handled calmly and strategically, allowing the system and evidence itself to demonstrate the homeowner's correctness.